Welcome back to another episode of We the People. I'm Richard Fowler.
I'm Carmen Berkeley.
And as always here on We the People, we talk about politics. We talk about all things that relate to people. We're really trying to figure out this catchphrase we haven't figured out, as y'all can see. We're working on it.
We'll figure it out. We're working on it.
You got to be honest, and you got to respect two hosts that are willing to say to you that we're still working on it.
Because you know what? That's actually going to be all of 2021. We all going to be working on whatever we're supposed to be working on in 2020. Okay.
So if you guys watch episode 5, and hopefully if you haven't, you should. We really dig deep on what it requires to find a therapist as a person of color. And so if you are looking for a therapist, there is a resource. We are telling you that there's a resource. It's the previous episode. So go watch it.
It was good. I was welling up. I said, uh-oh, she got me.
Listen, Claudia will do that to you. And don't worry, for both folks who got to see Claudia the first episode, if you really like Claudia's on this episode too, which is why you should like, download, subscribe, follow me, follow Carmen, definitely follow Claudia, because we're gonna keep having these conversations because we want to make you more better in 2021. Carmen, what was illuminated to me in the last episode is you are in the process of looking for a therapist.
Right. And by the time this airs, I need to have found one since I put up my business out there.
That part. When you put it out there, now the world is holding, you know what? But that's what's good. The world is now holding you accountable. And I'm holding you accountable. But
great.
I mean, why do you think it's so hard for people of color, in particular, Black people? And I would even go further, and let me go deeper. So for Black women, the Black margin, people who are in the Black community that are marginalized, and I guess the argument is that all the Black folks are marginalized, but it's really hard for Black folks to find therapists, or to maybe, what is it? Is it that it's hard to find a therapist, or it's hard to acknowledge the fact that I need a therapist?
I think it's two things. I think it's, we're built tough. And even though I think we know we don't have to be that tough, there is a level of vulnerability that you really have to acknowledge that that something needs to actually be worked on, that you need to talk to someone, that you don't have to hold all of this information. And just to be frank, and I think we say this a lot, but how it manifests is really deep, is in our community, we don't really talk about mental health. I mean, maybe now we kind of talk about mental health, but the fact of the matter is, at least in my family, it was very taboo for a long time to even talk about going and talking to someone about all of the traumas, the intergenerational trauma that our family has dealt with. What I feel very, I feel blessed because my sister actually she does mental health therapy. She works with people that work in substance abuse. So my cousins have PhDs. And so to me, seeing other family members actually acknowledge that one of the reasons why they went into the practice is because there are issues within our family that we don't talk about, and they have used the profession to help them have the words and the language. I think for me, that definitely was a barrier, was like just the shame and the embarrassment of feeling like I needed to talk to somebody. But you do have a therapist. So at least for you, Richard, did you have this reckoning moment, or like what was the thing that made you go, I really do need to speak to someone?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I think that's such a rich question because I'm Jamaican. For folks who don't know, Carmen knows that already. But there's one thing about the Caribbean, to talk about that ideal of coping, right, and strength, right? The ideal behind the Caribbean immigrant experience in this country, and I would say the general immigrant experience, so my parents, is you've got to be tough, you've got to keep it together, never let the devil see you cry, have a stiff upper lip, and even if you're going through something at home, like as I just remember growing up, no fault, there's no fault or judgment here. I think it's just worth acknowledging it. I remember growing up sort of saying, don't let them see you, don't let them know what's happening. Like you have to have this pride to you. And even though we are people who are, we sort of over-index in the health health sort of career space. So you see people of color, especially Caribbeans, are nurses, they're nurses assistants, they're doctors. It doesn't mean that they're willing to acknowledge that mental health is also part of health, right? The key word in mental health is health. And so I think that was the hardest, that was the initial step for me. The hardest part was, if I go to a therapist and I tell people in my family, they're going to think that I'm crazy. They're going to think that I'm mentally ill. They're going to think that I'm not strong enough, or my upper, like my, you know, the devil saw me cry, or whatever that sort of thing is. And so I think that was the reckoning, where one, I realized that it really doesn't matter what they think, because this is my life, right? And I'm the person that has to deal with, I'm the one carrying the weight. So I can either continue to carry the bags to make everybody else around me happy, or I can get the help that I need and find somebody to help me carry these bags or unload these bags, so that I could be a better actual family. I could be a better brother. I could be a better son. I could be a better friend. I could be a better partner. I could be a better lover. I could be all of these. I could do all these things mo better, right?
Right.
I had to first acknowledge the fact that I can't let somebody else dictate that to me. But it was a struggle. It was a struggle when I first was looking. It was a struggle when I first sat down with somebody. And it was also a struggle in opening up and peeling back the onion and some of the layers, that the work that came out in therapy, especially for me, because for me, I think my therapy journey began the moment that I came out. So when I came out, and that is a very traumatic experience, a lot of my friends around me, and it's really good to have your village also speaks to you. And when your village speaks, you really have an obligation to listen to your village. And a lot of my friends around me sort of were like, you might need to talk to somebody. Maybe you need to sit down with someone. Maybe this is a little tough. And I'll say this, Carmen, as somebody who now has a therapist, even I struggle with how to tell other people in my village, hey, I think you might need to talk to somebody, because I think that phrase sometimes has laid down with so much judgment in people, and how people receive it. It's laid down with judgment. It's laid down with shame, right? Like if you go to somebody who's in your village and you say, I think you need to talk to somebody, how do they react to that?
Right.
Because your people in your village know something's wrong. And they could know something's wrong because usually you don't drink a lot. And, for the past couple of weeks, you've been drinking too much. Usually you don't smoke a lot, but for the past couple of weeks, you've been smoking too much. Usually you don't party a lot, but for the past 2 weeks, you've partied a lot. Or maybe you've disconnected and your village sees it. Your village wants to respond to it. And it's really hard to respond.
Right. You said something that, it implanted in my head. You said it in jest, but you said something about the devil. And the reason why I want to pull that out is our relationship to religion is deep. No matter how you grew up, right? Like, at least for me, I grew up Baptist, so it's like, really, you're supposed to just go to Jesus with all of this. And that is actually supposed to be the fix. And it's not to say that having a spiritual relationship with the Orishas or God or Buddha is not a part of the fix, but that not going to therapy, not identifying, being okay with, you might need melatonin, medication, acupuncture, or some other way to support with what you're going through, that spirituality is a part of it, but that there is not something inherently wrong with you if you cannot pray the demons away. And for me, that was an illuminating thing that I had to go through, that I both need my spirituality. Every Sunday, I don't care about COVID. Every Sunday in this house, we have church, and it is through Leandria and Yolanda Adams. Okay, but
yes, it better be through Leandria and Yolanda.
And I also needed to do more meditation, like I'm not sleeping, and that has nothing to do with my relationship with Jesus. It has everything to do with the fact that I'm going through something, and I really do need folks to support me in working through it.
But let's unpack that for just a second. So according to the American Psychological Association, only 4% of psychologists are Black. Yet, Black people report experiencing psychological distress at a higher rate than white and Hispanic folks do. This is particularly urgent, emerging issue with young Black children, right? That since 1993, suicide rates amongst Black children from age 5 to 11 have increased to about twice the rate of white children and Black teenagers are more likely to commit suicide than white teenagers. And I wanted to sort of pull out that nugget you just talked about, religion, right? Because our community is so undergirded with this ideal of, if you take it to Jesus, he'll work it out. And if you pray, and you pray without ceasing, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't pray,
Yeah,
but
you totally should. Yeah.
But the Bible also talks about this ideal of you have faith without works, and some of the works part is acknowledging that you have a problem. And over the past couple of weeks, this has really been a conversation, Carmen, in the Black community. And Taraji P. Henson, who's famously known for being Cookie in the show Empire, has really sort of taken the lead in really, especially with women of color, in pushing women of color to engage in these mental health conversations, because there is just so much trauma that Black people are dealing with, and you don't really realize. And I mean, you think about the headlines, you hear the Tamar Braxton headline, I mean, and that's just one of the many headlines that you hear, the Kanye West headlines, right?
Mariah Carey, remember back in the day, Mariah, I mean, we made fun of her, but she was actually going through a breakdown.
Yeah, and how do we as Black people acknowledge a breakdown in our community and say, let people get help before they go to a breakdown point? And I'm somebody that have gone through mild breakdowns, like, oh my God, it's happening. I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm dealing with depression.
Right.
And so I just want to talk about the work that Taraji's doing, and I want to hold space for women of color and Black women, because Black women deal with a lot of trauma that they don't necessarily like to talk about. They don't talk about it. They don't deal with it. They just say, because I have kids. I mean, I think about my own mother, and you have 2 children, you're raising 2 boys by yourself in America. That in alone is a traumatic experience, understanding that my mom carries her own weight, but she carries the weight of 2 Black men and what our sort of interaction is with community, which in many cases could be violent, not us doing the violence, but the violence being done to us. And she as a mother has to sort of be this a whole person herself, but she then has to be this sort of mother lion, no matter how old the two cubs get.
Has to be tough and praying y'all up. And then that's supposed to be it.
Yes.
And she's just supposed to pray really hard and hope that everything is okay. And, society has not really provided adequate resources for that generation, which, to your point, and I know we want to show a quick clip, is why I'm grateful that someone like Taraji, who she doesn't have to use her platform to talk about therapy and mental health, but recognizes, and we talked about this in our last episode, that what you see on Instagram ain't what you get in real life. And that real people, I'm so happy that real people are starting to talk about the real challenges they're working through.
I think that's right. And before we go to the clip, I just want to tease out that one part, because even somebody like me and you, Carmen, you'll put up a great photo on Instagram, but you'll be at home crying. And I think
all tears.
But there's a reality to it that I think it's important for people to understand, like what you see on Instagram and what you see on Facebook and what you see on people's social, and ooh, look at me, I'm here, Throwback Thursday, or hey, living my best life. Under that living my best life is somebody who might be going through a breakdown. And so while we admire what we sort of, this, I call it like this admiration culture, right? Like, so you see them do it, so you want to do it. I mean, I think we saw during this pandemic, one person went to Tulum, and then every Black person was trying to get on a plane and go to Tulum.
The picture behind me, I'm in Tulum. That's so funny.
Right, but it's like, ooh, if they're in Tulum, they must be living their best life in Tulum, but you have no idea if that person's in Tulum, crying their eyes out. They could be having Sex and the City Part 2, the movie, in Tulum, Sex and the City 1, the movie, where she was in Mexico in that beautiful villa, crying her eyes out. And so it's just so important to acknowledge that. And I think you're so right that, Taraji, beyond the fact that she's an accomplished actress and a stalwart in our community, her leaning into this conversation around mental health and the importance of it is amazing, especially for women of color who carry the weight of not only the Black community, but at this rate, the American community on their shoulders.
What I find disturbing in our community, the African American community, is that we can talk about a thyroid, we can talk about cancer, breast cancer, AIDS even, but we won't deal with the mental. And that's an issue. I struggle with depression and anxiety. I would have to say I realized it about 2 years ago. I noticed the mood swings. Like, one day I'd be up and the next day I'd be down, feeling like I don't want to go out in public, almost agoraphobic, like, too much to deal with, feeling really awkward in my skin, feeling out of sorts, and just down, like Debbie Downer, like a dark cloud. And then there would be days where my brain wouldn't stop racing, I would think of the most worst scenarios in the world, which would heighten my anxiety. And, people were like, you just need to meditate and yoga and things like that. And I would do that, but my brain would still race. For me, there was no shame when I started to recognize it. It was like that I have to get some help because I'm the life of the party. And when I go dark, I go dark. I don't want to leave the house. And my friends started to notice me pulling back. My father, who also had his issues with mental health, was really open about it, about his manic depression. But as I think back, no one else really talked about it. It was hush hush, or he just crazy, or things like that. For my dad, what he needed was a culturally competent therapist. And it's not even about the skin color or the race, it's about being culturally competent. And the reason why we can't find culturally competent therapists is because at home, in the African American community, we don't talk about mental health. It's a stigma surrounding it. And when you have no one to talk to, what a person usually do is they will try to self-medicate. We're just not allowed to be vulnerable. We have to be strong all the time. This is 400 years of damage, 400 years of trauma that we have not dealt with. And the way we deal with it is be strong. Put on a strong face. Nothing's wrong with you. You don't have mental health. You're not gay. You're not allowed to be human. That's a lie. We hurt and we're suffering. When you think about the trauma the African American community has been through since we've been brought to this country, we have not dealt with that. And then you get to these microaggressions that are happening right in front of our faces every day on television. Women's sons are being taken from them for no reason at all. And through that, we still have to be strong. How fucking dare you? How dare you? How dare you put that on me? It's okay, we're human, no one's perfect. The perfection is the perfect lie. When my therapist said that, my wings sprouted. The pressure of trying to be something perfect, which doesn't exist, is crazy. Let go of that myth. When I'm vulnerable, or I'm scared, or I'm having these non-pleasant thoughts, I let it run. Because if you muffle it, it's only going to resurface again. So you have to kind of let it run and play out like a faucet. Just let it run until the water runs out. And then when you pick yourself back up.
Carmen, that was powerful.
That was. And you know what, Richard, it makes me think about other ways that folks can, identify how they want to work through the mental health challenges that they're dealing with. I mean, last episode, we talked about therapy. And I know, at least for me, one area that I've really been struggling with is sleeping. Like, I don't think I have slept since, not for real, since March. And I talked to you and you were saying something about meditation. So
yes.
Tell me more about it.
No, and I would say this to you, Carmen, and meditation doesn't take away from the fact that even I and everybody out there, like if you need a melatonin every now and then, take a melatonin if you need some sleep. But meditation has become a real part of my life. And I want to bring back she was in the last episode and she's back again for the second episode of We the People. We just couldn't have enough of her. Claudia Catarucci, who is a psychotherapist, the founder of Dynamic Meditation. She's a psychotherapist that specializes in people of color and the LGBTQIA community. We want to welcome her back to the show as we sort of engage in this conversation for the second half. Welcome back, Claudia. Hey.
Thank you.
And talking about some of the tools, right? So yes, you can find a therapist, but let's be real, therapy is expensive, but there's some tools that you can use to really unpack how to get your mental health. And I'm using your word, Carmen, mo better. Because I love it.
That should be a therapy, mo better.
It really could be.
Psychotherapy for sure.
So to begin the conversation, Claudia, I mean, LeBron James has the Calm app. You've seen folks talk about it, but there's this real double imagery around meditation. So when you first hear the word meditation, you sort of think of the image you saw growing up of, a man of color from the near or the far east with his hands folded, sort of sitting outside on a yoga mat and like at the Taj Mahal, right? And this is the imagery that you have in therapy. Now LeBron and Taraji and so many celebrities of color have begun to sort of break that down, and you realize you could just download an app and you could do it on the app. But what is meditation for folks out there who just know it as the older man sort of sitting in front of the Taj Mahal?
Well, I want to really say that that's like one of my really juicy areas of expertise in this way. And it speaks to people of color. It speaks to people who have ADHD. It speaks to people who have PTSD, right? Because it's actually triggering for folks. If you're full of energy, to think that you're going to sit for 30 minutes in the silence, like that in itself can be an overwhelming thought. So this is what I'd like to propose, right? Meditation is all about again, self-investigation, getting nice and quiet, because we want to see what's in there. We want to see what's in there. Now, for those of you who are saying, oh my gosh, I don't want to see what's in there, that's activating to me. There's all different forms of meditation, okay? Mine, Richard knows this well, my type of meditation, dynamic meditation, is dynamic. It's portable. It's usable anywhere. And what you do is, to make it easier for you, you ask yourself a series of questions. Okay, doesn't that sound easier already? Like, what am I trying to control? How am I feeling unsafe? How am I needing approval? What am I trying to figure out? Right? So all of that, all of a sudden, will raise what we call the stuff that's in the unconscious. Okay. And so meditation is a way of pressing pause, y'all. It just presses pause, right? You press pause on your reaction, and then it provides sovereignty, right? It provides you the ability to choose how you want to respond, to notice what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, especially now, right?
Carmen, I know you have the next question, but I just want to, because I think we're teasing things out, but that word there, sovereign, right? And I think people don't, sovereignty, like when you think of sovereignty, you think of countries, but even when you think of like what America went through at the beginning of this month, right? Where we saw what sovereign, even if you like break down what happened at the Capitol a couple weeks ago, or whenever it happened, based on when you're watching this, right? And think about the fact that the mayor of the District of Columbia, because she's not sovereign, right? Use that definition, right? Because DC is not a state that is onto itself, encompassing all of its power. It's not free. She was not able to secure herself. She couldn't secure her own city. The District of Columbia couldn't secure itself, and they had to go to the neighbor, right, Virginia, who is free onto itself. And Virginia was like, don't worry, we can send help. And Virginia sent over their troops to help secure the District of Columbia. But that ideal of sovereign is so big, because I think, especially in people of color, we're not necessarily free enough in ourselves. We're not sovereign enough in ourselves to deal with what it is that comes up. Because when it comes up, you have to be free to say, okay, I'm free enough to deal with whether it's mama stuff, daddy stuff, auntie stuff, uncle stuff, gay stuff, the trauma, the police stuff. You have to be sovereign within yourself to protect yourself, right? And that example just stuck out to me because it was a perfect example of, you had a city that, because they weren't sovereign, they couldn't protect themselves. They couldn't guard themselves from something that was happening. An internal insurrection was happening, and they couldn't protect themselves. And it's the same that happens to people. But you have a question, right?
Right. And what I want to say to that is, sovereignty is the ability to choose, right? I choose if I want to be in a relationship with you. I choose how I want to respond to this. I choose it. And DC, what you were saying is, in that moment, couldn't choose, right? They had to ask. They were beholden, right? When we have sovereignty, we're not beholden to our past, to our trauma, to our bad relationships, right? So meditation gives us that great big pause, and
Yeah.
therapy does as well, to start being more sovereign. I can now choose, right?
Mm.
I love that, Claudia. So, okay, I have to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
So my fifth grade teacher used to make us meditate, and so I've been like anti-meditation since then. But but the world, I know I was all the things you diagnosed. A little bit of ADHD, a little bit of off the chain. And so I want to know, for folks that like myself that are thinking about meditation and maybe want to start a daily practice, how does one begin?
Oh, such a good question. Such a good question. Listen, you begin by showing up. And I really want, obviously my YouTube channel, I actually start you at the very beginning with 1 minute, because for some of us, just 1 minute of getting quiet, and even if you have questions, right? So I have to say that dynamic, I feel like it's just like it gives you a little ladder, Carmen, because you're like, okay, for example, if I say it right now, Carmen, if you closed your eyes and I say, how are you feeling unsafe right now? You notice what pops, okay? You just notice what pops. You don't hang on to it. You go, oh, there it is. Can I let that go, right? Right. And so meditation is about just going inside, and you could set a timer. Let's say, for those of you out there, set your timer. Say, I'm going to do 2 minutes where I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to look, just do what I call an arriving breath, an observing breath, where you notice, how is my mind chatty right now? Right? You do a drone breath, right? It's like a little drone and you're like, what am I feeling right now? So I have a video on all 4 types of breaths that we do. Super easy, right? You do a breath and you check in, you arrive, you ground, you do an observing breath, you do a settling breath, okay? So there's all sorts of ways. Now listen, what I like doing for folks is step by steps. I don't believe, because I think meditation, Richard, to your point, can be super abstract and lofty, and we think of people in robes on a mountain, right? No, right? Really, seriously, that's too.
I'm like, girl,
exactly.
girl, okay.
That's too lofty. It's too abstract. It's too. We need some concrete. How do I do this? Right? How do I do this? And that's why I always say that dynamic is portable, because you could be on the metro, or you could be walking, or you could be in a staff meeting, and you start asking the questions with your eyes open. Okay? Because we want it on the go. We don't want to be meditators on retreat in Tulum.
Right.
We want it when mom calls and she's got that tone of voice, right?
But that's such a good.
Claudia, you just spoke to my soul. Okay.
But that's such a good point. That's such a good point, because I think it goes back to this ideal of like, that's freedom, right? The freedom to be in a staff meeting and to say, I'm gonna just, like, my boss said something that could be racist. My boss said something that could be sexist. My boss said something that was misogynistic, which I think a lot of us are dealing with in our workplaces, especially, where we are as a country. And you're able to say, wait a minute, or joke, all of that.
Right.
And you're able to say, wait a minute, with my eyes open, I'm gonna take the freedom to check in with myself and do, like, let me call myself and figure out, are all the lines still connected? Are we still good? Just like you do when your internet slows down at home and you get on your Comcast or your RCN or your Verizon and your internet app and you see if there's an outage. And it's the freedom to say, I'm going to check into myself and see if there's an outage. But Claudia, there is this sort of ideal out there that meditation is very, I don't know what a better, white. And well, that's what white folks do. The white folks do that, and they do yoga, and that's not.
It's crunchy. Right. Yeah, it's crunchy.
It's very granola, latte sipping, quote unquote liberal. So how do we break that from a societal perspective? How do we break? I mean, you're living in Seattle, girl. How do we break down that stigma that exists around meditation as a tool that people of color can use to free themselves.
And we really, really want to be conscious of that, because sometimes there's so many things that can help us, right? Like yoga. Yoga has studies for PTSD, and people of color, we know we got to move our bodies. When I teach meditation, I teach about tribal dancing. Those were original meditations. There's tribal dancing, raves. The reason why raves are so popular is because we're in rhythm. We're feeling something powerful that's connected to the earth. So there's, in my way of teaching it, it's all about, that's why I call it dynamic. Okay. So it first came all the way from very brown people in India. All right, Siddhartha, very brown people. What happened is it started to move across the globe, and everyone started to add their flavor. How I teach it is like, so in Japan, they added their flavor, which was very disciplined, straight back, right? Hours and hours, and you couldn't fall asleep, right? As it started to move, Laos, Thailand has their own form of meditation, but it started all the way there. And then little by little, which was in the last century, is when East and West, thank you that the West was open, right? And it started with things like contemplative prayer, right? Reflective prayer. But the way that I teach it is we're meditating all the time, you guys. When we're in a chorus, and we just feel that light and that feeling, we're meditating. That runner's high, we're meditating, because meditation is about not being in the future, not being in the past. When we're tribal dancing, we are meditating, right? The thing is, how do we harness it? How do we harness it so that in our every now moment, we're using being present? And that's the ultimate thing, right? So no, and I do a rhythmic breath. And why do I do a rhythmic breath? Because for people of color, rhythm is essential. We love rhythm. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So no, don't be fooled. This is not just for white people, it's for all of us. And first of all, it came from all the way across the right. So does that help? Is that?
Yeah,
that's
helps.
good. That's good. I mean, just to think about that, it's almost like it came full circle just for you, right? It came from us. They, whatever ism you want to call it, the ism happened. It was taken from us. And I think in this moment, going back to my word of the episode, in our sovereignty, right? We have to go reclaim that, right? We have to reclaim this idea that we can check in on ourselves. And I think that's so refreshing, especially given that our communities have gone through so much over the past, in 2020, we're now continue to go through it in 2021. The ideal enough that we could check in on ourselves. We don't need somebody to check in on us is a very, powerful feeling.
Keep the beat, right? For people of color, we love the beat. Keep the beat. Keep the beat on yourself. Keep the beat on your breath. Keep the beat on your practice. Keep the beat. So think of meditation in that way.
Richard, that needs to be our next show. This music therapy, I am here for it.
Yes,
keep the beat.
Yes.
I love it. Claudia, how can folks find more information out about you if they're trying to keep the beat and they want to keep the beat with Claudia? How do they do it?
Yes, the way that you'll really get a sense for me is on my YouTube channel, because I teach you stuff. Everything that I'm talking about here, you can see, you can do it while you're walking down the street, walking your dog. That's really the most important one. But www.claudiacatarucci.com is a great place to find the way that I work, which is all about being a partner therapist. Meditation is you being a therapist to you. It really is. Do it all.
Claudia, we want to thank you so much for joining us on We the People. This was amazingly dynamic and amazingly
Yes,
dope.
dynamic.
And hopefully folks will use this as a tool. That's what we want to be here on We the People. So Claudia, thank you much for joining us.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate
Carmen,
it.
thinking
nice
of you.
to meet you. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Oh, I mean, Carmen, mind-blowing.
I mean, she got my spirit in the last episode, but in this one, being a therapist to yourself.
Sovereignty, listen, that's my word. That might be my 2020 word. Sovereign. You know what? I'm sovereign. You can't do that to me. I'm a sovereign state, and I'm gonna protect my border. And I'm gonna protect. And I'll go further. I'm gonna protect my borders. I'm sovereign.
Okay. I'm protecting this Zoom box, baby. Ooh, I love it.
So, I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways, obviously the sovereign piece, obviously meditation is you doing therapy for yourself. But number 3 for me was, it's like therapy's coming back to us. Therapy, we created it. People of color, Black folks, brown folks, indigenous folks, we created this. And now, because of technology and because we were deprived it, because of whatever ism you want to put on it, colonialism, racism, etc., xenophobia, all of that. We're now getting back to it. And that to me was a very much a like, yes, come back to it.
Yeah, I think my lesson is that for the chatter mind, like I already know I have all the things, I definitely feel like the reason people like me is because I'm wild. But that mind that's always moving, it does need to slow down. And that meditation, it doesn't have to be the 45-minute exercise, because I think that is where sometimes I get the block. I'm like, well, I can't sit still for 30 minutes. But what she said about, can you take the 1 minute? Can you actually ask yourself 3 or 4 questions that really bring you back to center? I think that's necessary, especially because, Richard, we're in the land of the unknown. I had no idea last week that, or a couple of days ago, that the Capitol was going to be completely taken over and that my mental health was going to be challenged. I was just sitting down for a cup of coffee. So knowing that these things might continue to happen in our world, what are the ways in which we can be therapists to ourselves?
I think that's such a good point. And I would be remiss if I didn't add this, because it is, as crazy as it might sound, it's actually rather effective. And the one example I think of as you were saying that was, prior to pre-COVID, we lived on the road. I lived in airplanes. And there's one instance that happened to me in the Charlotte airport. It was a long trip. I really am at that place when I want to go home. And anybody who travels, who has the privilege to do it, I mean, it's a privilege for work, but it can be quite demanding. Like when you're on that last leg of a flight and and you're in the hub, like Charlotte, Atlanta, New York, and that once you get on the plane, it is like a 45-minute hop and you're home.
You want to get home. You just want to get there.
And you want to get home. And literally the ramp agent was like, the flight's delayed. And this sense of anxiety came over me. It's almost like a panic attack. It's like, all I want to do is go home. And you're telling me it's 10 o'clock at night and I have to wait another hour before I can get on the plane. And that means I have to wait 2 hours to get home.
Yeah.
And like that feeling came up, and I literally, just as Claudia talked about, is like, okay, pause. Yeah. Let's check in. And I literally started to breathe. And I started to just breathe. What is this now feeling? Okay, this, or like you said, what's making me feel unsafe? I'm not at home. I'm in this airport. And just acknowledging that, I was almost immediately allowed, it enabled me in that moment. I didn't have to sort of be in this sort of lotus position. I just sort of was standing up, waiting for my flight with the bag, the suitcase, the coat, the story.
Oh yeah.
The jam. And I was able to just breathe my way through what was happening to me. And I'm like, this is a very effective tool, because it allowed me to check in on myself and deal with the fact that, yes, there is anxiety, like this ideal of being home or not being home is very traumatic. And I can acknowledge that and hold that and deal with it. I never think I was going to share that, but I think, as you were saying, being able to check in on yourself, it's actually real, and you could do it in real time. And that's what makes it such a powerful tool in your sort of mental health tool belt in 2021.
Well, you know what? I'm taking all of Claudia's advice. I'm gonna go to her to her YouTube channel, to the Dynamic YouTube channel, because at least for me, I really want for 2021 to be different. And now that I know that we live in a land of the unknown, I don't want to get to the end of the year saying I did not work on all the things. I want to get to the end of the year and be able to say, I knew in the beginning of the year it was going to be crunk, and whatever came at me, I was armed and prepared. That armor of God that we were, that we were raised with. I need to have that armor in order to excel. Because I do think, Richard, that most of us know that we want to go upward. But the way
Yes.
to go upward is to be more better. It's to be healthy on the outside and be healthy on the inside.
I think that's right. And I think what we can learn from 2020 is 2020 taught us how to deal with 2021. So we could choose to take all that old stuff from 2020, the anxiety, we could choose to have the low level anxiety and the depression, and we could choose to make it worse. Or in 2021, we could actually unpack it and say, okay, I have low level anxiety. I have low level depression. Now I'm going to deal with it. So this is our opportunity. This sort of month, this period is a moment for us to say, what did I learn in 2020? And how do I take what I learned in 2020 and utilize that to make me more better in 2021?
That's right.
It was amazing. It's always amazing talking to you.
I know we could talk all day, but thank you for, you always push us to the edge. And people don't know this, but Richard, we've known each other for a long time.
We have.
And we off camera, we talk about this kind of stuff. On camera, we always talk about politics. But I'm happy that this is what we talked about today, because people that work in our field they're all going through it too. They just won't talk about it. So I appreciate you for helping us arrive at this place.
Listen, honestly, my goal wasn't to go to the edge, but if we're here, hello.
Hey, Edge! Got my edges back in 2020.
I love it. Listen, it's always a pleasure for us to be with you here on We the People. I'm Richard Fowler.
I'm Carmen Spindiego, Berkeley.
And we'll see you next time.